From all those formidable factories across all four corners of the Earth.
There are over 7 million different factories on Earth, producing pretty much everything imaginable. How do you pick the best one?
We've shortlisted 5 of the world's best mega factories for scrutiny. The Kennedy Space Center, where space streams were built. From India, the world's largest oil refinery. German efficiency in overdrive, the Volkswagen Car Plant. The world's largest steelworks in South Korea. Home to 1 billion baked beans, Europe's largest food processing plant. 5 industrial fortresses, each of them, in their own way, world beaters. Judging their performance across 5 key tests, for the first time, we reveal the world's ultimate factory.
It's just incredible, just amazing science.
First category up, let's throw the spotlight on size. From our selection of factory giants, which can boast the single largest building? Starting us off in 5th place, India's oil king. This is the Reliance Oil Refinery in Jamnagar. It sprawls over 30 square kilometers, and its biggest single construction is a 145,000 cubic meter storage tank. But in this spaghetti fest of steel, you'd be pushed to identify exactly where components start or end.
There'd be enough metal work to make the equivalent of 19 Eiffel Towers, and enough concrete to make 10 Empire State Buildings.
Straight in at number 4, the Posco Gwangyang Steelworks in South Korea, where the largest building is the cold rolling mill at 331,000 cubic meters. But it is just one of several huge buildings in this linear mega factory.
Each process has its own building in line. And once the steel's completed each step in the casting and rolling process, it gets moved straight on to the next building without any delay.
At 3, the home of the humble baked bean. The Kitt Green Food Plant in Wigan, England. At 667,000 cubic meters, the enormity of this factory is in stark contrast to the tiny product that ends up on our plates.
In order to pack nearly 2 million cases of canned food, the factory has these 11 high bay cranes built right into the roof of the factory.
Driving in at number 2, the Volkswagen Car Factory at Wolfsburg in Germany. This mother of all car plants can produce more than 750,000 vehicles a year. The largest single structure here is Final Assembly Building 54 at 1.2 million cubic meters.
German efficiency at its best.
Blasting into first place is the mind-bogglingly huge Vehicle Assembly Building at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Adapted to work on every single US space mission since the 60s, the VAB, as they call it, is the tallest single-story building in the world. In fact, if it was a normal building, it would be 50 floors high.
The VAB building's so big, the Statue of Liberty could actually fit inside. And she could also have a few of her friends if she had them as well.
So, the Kennedy Space Center wins the first test. Let's slide open those massive doors and breathe in some space history. Today, the last of the space shuttles to be built, Endeavour, is about to leave NASA's gigantic Vehicle Assembly Building, the VAB, for the final time. Having flown 25 space missions, Endeavour is being retired to the California Space Museum. But first, it needs some essential maintenance from engineer Bart Panulo and the rest of his shuttle moving team.
You'll notice that the back of the orbiter looks a little skinny and the front has the hood missing, so to speak, which means that the hazardous commodities have all been removed. They've been decontaminated.
Go for main engine start. All 3 engines up and burning, and lift off.
The US shuttle program may have been shut down in 2011, but neither it nor any previous space mission since the 60s would have existed without the VAB, one of the largest and most technologically advanced factories in the world. Construction of the giant VAB kicked off in the early 60s. To help it withstand tropical storms, its foundations were super strengthened by over 4,000 sand-filled steel pilings driven 50 meters into the limestone bedrock. But in 1965, the VAB finally opened for business. Its first key task was the assembly of the Saturn V, the tallest, heaviest, and most powerful rocket ever. It propelled man to the moon for the very first time on Apollo 11.
Eagle has landed.
By the mid-80s, NASA's space shuttle program was well underway, and the VAB once again played a key role. Conrad Nagel has been an engineer at NASA since the 1960s. It was his job to modify the internal structure of the VAB for the space shuttle after the Apollo program ended in 1972. At the heart of the VAB, 7 huge platforms, each at different levels, can be extended or retracted to allow engineers access to the rockets. They were used on Saturn V rockets and the space shuttles, but will soon be replaced with more modern structures.
Over the years, we actually ended up modifying a lot of the platforms to provide better access. We added additional elements that allowed us to get closer to the vehicle.
Also essential for accessing every part of the enormous rockets were the building's 5 enormous high-lift bridge cranes. Tony Sabatino is a specialist bridge crane operator who worked on the shuttle program.
These are some of the controls. This is the main hoist joist. This here is a selector switch, and it has a fine speed, a coarse speed, and a high speed.
Even at high speed, it still takes 45 minutes for an empty hook to reach the ground, 160 meters below. But once there, each crane has the ability to move up to 295 tons to within a millimeter.
In the beginning, I would say absolutely, you're really nervous and, when you're first learning. But as time goes, you don't really look at it as how much it costs or anything like that.
As it gets ready to leave on its well-earned retirement mission, Endeavour is dwarfed by the VAB's giant doors. At 139 meters high, they're quite simply the biggest in the world.
Doors are lifted up in a sequence. So the first one comes up, the next one comes up, and when they get to the top, they're all kind of stacked together. And when they're open, of course, it opens up to the whole world out as you roll the vehicle out to the launch pad.
Despite the mothballing of the shuttle program, none of the VAB's multi-million-pound hardware will be scrapped. Engineers are now gearing up for NASA's next-generation space launch system, SLS, designed to send astronauts further into space than ever before. Bart and the shuttle-moving team have finished preparing Endeavour for her final mission, and the world's media has gathered to record her final journey. But with the American space ambitions moving up a gear, this certainly won't be the last mission for the VAB.
I absolutely love NASA's vehicle assembly building. It's phenomenal, and what I love is they were going to build the biggest rocket ever, the Saturn V. They went, oh, where should we get it built? Oh, nowhere. Oh, that's okay, we'll build it ourselves, and we'll build the world's biggest single-story factory to do it. It's just amazing.
Coming up, big buildings means big bucks. So which of our 5 mega factories cost the most? 5 phenomenal mega factories, but which is the world's best? Pitting these awesome industrial icons against each other in 5 key categories will reveal the ultimate winner. NASA's colossal Kennedy Space Center in Florida is currently ahead, with the world's largest single factory building. But now we're shifting orbit as we throw the spotlight onto cold, hard cash. How much did it cost to create these prolific palaces of production? Initial investment. It may have cost a whopping $31 million, but it's still the least expensive of our 5 factories. The Kitt green food plant in northern England.
It's actually made up of 5 factories in one, producing 1.34 billion cans every year of beans, baby food, pasta, soups and puddings.
Moving up a gear, it cost almost 39 times as much to build the mega car plant in Wolfsburg. But the $1.27 billion price tag only steers it to 4th place. We're accelerating into stratospheric levels of cash now. It cost an astronomical $1.5 billion to construct America's first purpose-built space exploration center.
When they were building the vehicle assembly building, they had to clear about 2.5 square kilometres of land, just for the one factory. And to do that, over 1 million cubic metres of dirt had to be shifted.
Now, multiply that by 4, because to build the Reliance Refinery, money was literally pumping like oil. $6 billion of it, as they even took on Mother Nature herself.
So imagine the project brief. Boys, you've got 3 years to build this. I'm bringing in 75,000 people as they did. They all worked round the clock. They achieved it, even though they got hit by a cyclone.
But at number 1, the Posco Gwangyang Steelworks in South Korea, the largest steel factory ever. Costing a cool $18 billion to build, it's quite simply the most expensive factory in the world.
Awesome.
So, steel yourself for a tour around this Korean tour de force. On the edge of South Korea's Bagan Mountains. This mega steelworks supplies gargantuan amounts of top-grade steel for the car and shipbuilding industries. At its heart, 5 blast furnaces, 120 meters high and 40 meters wide. But the real monster of the bunch is blast furnace number 4. Line manager Ji-Young Choi must ensure his furnace produces enough steel today to make 14,500 cars. He has just 8 hours.
This blast furnace produces over 5 million tons of hot metal per year. So it's a unique blast furnace. So our people are proud of that.
The steel giant is the world's number 1. But that's still not enough. Within 7 years, they plan to increase production by 25%. But at this factory, they're used to achieving the extraordinary, with every aspect of steel production happening on this one site.
Close your eye and think how big this plant automatically produces every day, 365 days a year. So it's running, I think it's a human body. It's a big, giant human body.
And like a human body, it needs feeding. And this steelworks has an insatiable appetite, particularly for iron ore and coal, which are imported in vast quantities into Posco's own port before being consumed by the steel-making process. Refined iron ore is poured into blast furnaces and superheated to 1,250 degrees Celsius. Coal and limestone are added, which helps remove impurities. Under such elevated temperatures, the ore breaks down and forms steel. It's still mostly iron, but also has a small amount of carbon, which varies depending on the kind of steel required. And the whole process is controlled from here.
We cannot look inside the blast furnace, so this control room is the headquarters to control the optimized blast furnace. So it's very important place.
The steel industry is one of the most dangerous in the world, and blast furnaces are regarded as high-risk areas. In the past, steel workers had to manually test the temperature of molten metal, a highly dangerous job that put them at severe risk. So, the world's most advanced steel factory installed this, Liquirob. The robotic arm that has no problem withstanding extreme temperatures, vastly reducing the risk to humans. This factory was the first to introduce the German-designed robot. It has a unique 3D positioning sensor, allowing it to add purifying chemicals safely and with absolute precision.
3년 전에 리큐 로봇가 우리 공장에 도입이 되면서 그런 사람들이 하던 공정을 리큐 로봇가 대신해 하게 된 거예요. 자동화돼 가지고 지금 저 리큐 로봇은 풀 오토매틱 작업을 하고 있어요.
The factory constantly casts purified steel into huge slabs that are sent directly to one of 10 rolling plants. Every 80 seconds, a 15-meter hunk of metal emerges from the ovens. In just 15 minutes, it's hot-rolled into a kilometre-long coil of thin steel for making car parts. Back at number 4, the world's most productive blast furnace may not keep that title for long, because plans are in place for an even bigger one. But for today, Ji-Young Choi has achieved his output target of 14,500 tons.
Posco #1!
5 monstrously huge and expensive mega beasts. But to maximize all that power, you need people. Coming up, we throw the focus on the workers. Man and Mega Factory working in perfect harmony. Five world-beating, ginormous mega factories assessed on their key attributes. The sky-high Kennedy Space Center, the world's largest oil refinery, the ultra-robotic mother of all car plants, the world's biggest steelworks, and Europe's largest food processing plant. Each is put to the test and rated in 5 key categories. Currently sitting in pole position after the first 2 tests, the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Let's throw the spotlight now on employees. How many people does it take to power these mega beasts? In 5th place, the Kitt Green Food Factory in northern England. Producing 200,000 tons of baked beans alone every year, the $31 million plant is packed with technology, even using lasers to scan the beans. But all that automation means it only needs 1,350 workers.
The only stage where just humans are involved is the taste testing stage. Surely no robot could ever do that.
At number 4, NASA's Kennedy Space Center is an epicenter of mental muscle. There are only 2,100 employees here, but most of them are highly specialized in their field. Korea's Mammoth Steelworks rolls into 3rd place. This fully automated steel mill runs 24/7, with as few as 750 employees on any single shift. Nevertheless, it needs 6,137 employees altogether to keep the metal moving.
They are printing money at Posco. They're making almost double the amount per tonne on steelworks compared to any other steelwork factory in the world. And that is because they're so efficient.
In it too, Reliance, with more than 15,000 employees. The oil refinery is also super automated, though staff numbers are high enough to justify having their own town, with a school, bank, supermarkets and golf course.
Most of the processes in the factory are completely automated, and each facility only has 2 people on average to monitor them at any time. I mean, that's quite phenomenal when you look at the size of this thing and how much is going on in there.
But parking in the top slot, Europe's largest car plant. Here, hundreds of robots rub shoulders with a gargantuan human workforce of 51,500. 42% of the entire German town where it's based.
Wolfsburg used to be a sleepy little town of only 1,000 inhabitants, but since the factory opened, it's boomed to 120,000.
Time to strap ourselves in for a ride through one of the most imposing production lines on planet Earth. This immense factory in Wolfsburg, northern Germany, is home to Europe's largest car manufacturer. Covering almost 7 square kilometers, it's an industrial metropolis of epic proportions, and one of the most technologically advanced car plants on Earth. The manufacturers are so proud of it, they've put their production processes on display, creating this separate showcase in Dresden, called the Transparent Factory. It allows us to get up close and personal to one of the most impressive production processes on Earth. Today's mission, produce another 4,500 cars. First off, the components have to get to the factory, 12,000 of them for every vehicle. Transporting this volume of parts into a city centre location could have been a logistical nightmare. So the factory is cunningly linked into Dresden's tram system with a cargo tram.
Cargo tram travels 7 times a day through downtown Dresden to the logistics center, and it carries 80% of the needed parts, except the raw bodies, which are too wide for cargo tram.
Once at the factory, the vast number of components need distributing along a 1.5-kilometre assembly line. The solution? Perfectly choreographed robots, all operating in total silence. 57 computer-controlled sleds are directed around the factory by 100,000 magnets hidden in the floor, which act like a roadmap, allowing the sleds to go anywhere along the production line, even in the lifts.
What we have over here now is the guts of the car, the engine, the chassis. These parts are getting ready for the marriage.
Back in Wolfsburg, the emphasis isn't on playing to the audience, but sheer, mind-blowing numbers. Here, too, much of the work is carried out by robots, working alongside the massive 51,500 strong contingent of humans. The giant body shop covers an area the size of 17 football stadiums. And in the vast assembly buildings, where engines are married with everything else and rigorous tests are carried out, cars emerge at the rate of almost 190 an hour. To store all these cars, they've built the Autostadt, or Car Town. 2 60-metre-high dispensing towers, each with a capacity to hold 400 brand new cars. Entering the towers from an underground tunnel, new cars are lifted into place by hydraulics at a speed of 1.5 meters per second and shelved, ready for collection. Car number 4,500 leaves the Wolfsburg site, its place in the Autostadt already filled. The factory has achieved today's target, and round-the-clock production continues at the largest car plant in Europe. Battling it out to be named the world's ultimate mega factory, one giant plant is setting the pace. Europe's largest car factory. But how will the German giant stack up in terms of output? It's time to wind up the production lines and fuel up the furnaces. As we check out production tonnage. At 5, Houston, we have a problem. Plummeting from its current position at number 2, the Kennedy Space Center can only claim 6,000 tons a year. That's the weight of 3 shuttles and their fuel tanks as assembled in 2010. But then again, this is a product that can reach the stars.
The VAB may not win on production tonnage, but it produces way more information than any of the other factories. I mean, 1.1 petabytes, in fact. That's 11 with 14 zeros after it.
From bytes to beans, at 4, it's the Kitt Green Processing Plant. This is the giant multinational's biggest factory, its international flagship, combining food laboratories, a distribution centre and a can-making factory, altogether producing over 1 billion cans of food a year.
In a year, this factory produced 415,000 tons of food. I mean, that's a huge amount. It took 31,453 lorries just to drive it away from the plant. It's absolutely incredible.
Throttling up to 3rd place, the Volkswagen Car Plant in Wolfsburg, Germany. With an annual output from its robotized production line of 1.4 million tons and counting.
They just happen to make 750,000 vehicles a year. That's just phenomenal.
Taking 2nd place, that phenomenal steelworks. The pride of South Korea, this factory produces just short of 21 million tons of steel a year. Not only is this more than any other steelworks on the planet, it's enough to make 5 Golden Gate bridges every week. But we're really pumping up the tonnage now, because one of our other factories produces even more, and by a massive margin. At number 1 for production tonnage, India's Reliance Oil Refinery, with an astonishing 60 million tons of refined oil every year.
It actually houses the world's largest catalytic cracker, which means it produces a diverse range of different byproducts. And as a result, that makes it the world's most profitable refinery as well.
So let's fill up the tank and pay a visit to the undisputed king of the oil world. Early morning rush hour at Jamnagar in northwest India. 1 in every 50 vehicles on this and every road in the world is running on fuel made here. The largest oil refinery on the planet, 30 square kilometers beside the Gulf of Kutch. 2 huge complexes with over 20,000 kilometers of piping. Producing record levels of over 17 different fuels, lubricants and plastics, all made from this crude oil. At the refinery's docks, pilot boat captain Satvinder Sethi is heading 30 kilometers offshore to inspect the latest arrival, a tanker filled with crude oil, fresh from the Middle East. It's essential the refinery's supply of black gold never stops. But a fully laden supertanker carrying 300,000 tons of crude oil can't dock in shallow water. It must unload offshore. The solution? Connect the tanker to a single point mooring, or SPM. It's a highly specialized and tricky job that Captain Satvinder oversees every 3 days.
Getting the vessel alongside or being moved to the SBM is tense and requires a very focused concentration on the job, especially in the months of monsoon.
The crude is pumped ashore and stored in one of 82 vast tanks, each with a capacity of 100,000 tons. Just one enormous tanker would be enough to supply an average-sized refinery for a year. But Jamnagar is far from average. It can process a tanker's worth of crude every 2 days. And this is where it's sent first. A specialist super-producing distillation column. The crude is heated to a scorching 600 degrees Celsius, which distills it into heavy and light products. Lighter products like aviation fuel, gasoline, LPG and diesel are more profitable. Heavier, lower-grade products such as lubrication oil are less profitable, but at Jamnagar, nothing is wasted. The heavier products are sent to this, the fluidized catalytic cracker, or FCC. Here, the heavy oil molecules are chemically split or cracked to create lighter products, meaning a profit can be squeezed out of every drop of crude oil. It's all controlled from here, under the watchful eye of the company's senior vice president, Mr. E. James.
This is like my temple. This is a temple of control. This room is a room from where we ensure all the plant all around are running extremely healthy. The safety of the plant is ensured every point of time. All is being monitored from here. This is my nerve center.
Back at the jetty, another of the 120 ships that are docked here every month is arriving. Captain Satvinder is overseeing this final stage of the refinery process, the shipping out of the finished product. It's up to him and his colleagues to make sure that this too runs like clockwork.
Having the ships coming here day in, day out, and as pilots, we being responsible for that, gives you a great satisfaction, the feeling of a job well done.
If you laid out all the pipework from the factory in one straight line, it would reach from the very northern tip to the most southern tip of India. And India's not a small country.
Coming up, Kennedy Space Center has the single largest building. But each of our 5 mega factories is like a mini metropolis. So which has the biggest footprint? And decision time. Which of them is the world's ultimate mega factory? 5 of the biggest and most complex centers of engineering and scientific excellence on the planet. But which is the world's best of the best? Counting down in 5 key categories, which will be revealed as the ultimate mega factory. It's close because, amazingly, 3 of our fabulous factories are currently tying in first place. The Indian Oil Refinery, the Korean Steelworks and the German Car Plant. So there's all to play for as we throw the spotlight back onto size. NASA's VAB may be the largest single factory building, but which has the largest overall complex size? At number 5, the Kitt Green Factory, Europe's largest food processing plant, which spreads over 226,175 square meters. Although it's the size of 56 football fields, it's still the smallest of our 5.
Kitt Green might be small, but it's perfectly formed.
In 4th place, the Volkswagen Car Plant in Germany. At 6.57 square kilometers, the Wolfsburg complex has 70 kilometers of private railway track and 75 kilometers of roads built just to service it. At 3, the heavy metal giants, Korea's Posco Gwangyang Steelworks. Hundreds of specialist buildings cover 17.6 square kilometers, including its own dedicated, purpose-built harbour.
Korea doesn't actually have the natural resources to produce steel. That didn't really deter the guys who built this factory, though. They just slapped a massive great port right next to it so they could ship everything they need in and out.
A refined runners-up slot for India's Reliance Oil. Half the size of Manhattan, this gigantic complex covers 30 square kilometres.
They've got a really cool space-like room where they can actually see the pressures and pick up any problems in the system. I think it's amazing.
But at number one, a factory devoted to space. And space is what they have in abundance at the Kennedy Space Center, an astonishing 570 square kilometers of it. Over 3 times the size of Washington, D.C., you could fit Manhattan into this place 7 times over.
The VAB has the world's largest doors, and they're 70 centimetres thick and can withstand wind speeds of over 200 kilometres an hour, which is quite handy really because it's based down in Florida where they're subject to hurricane season.
So, the Kennedy Space Center wins on overall complex size as well as building size. But size isn't everything, and while Kitt Green takes up less space than the others, it operates at incredible speeds. So, surprisingly, it actually produces more tons per square metre of space than any of our other contenders. And that means it more than qualifies as one of the world's mega factories. Let's take a look. To keep up with massive demand, particularly in the UK, this state-of-the-art facility in Wigan, England, must transform 350 tons of these into more than 500,000 cans of baked beans in just 6 hours. Kitt Green is the largest processing factory in Europe, and it's designed for one purpose alone: canning food at a phenomenal rate. It's 8 a.m, and in the factory's loading bay, staff are overseeing the delivery of the raw product, dried haricot beans. In charge, manufacturing leader and lifelong baked bean fanatic, Graham Souter.
These beans have travelled from North America. This is the final stage of their journey to become one of our tins of Heinz beans. We're processing up to 350 tonnes a day. We blend that with 500 tonnes a day of sauce to make around 10 million finished cans.
The first stage in the transformation into baked beans is the grading process. Weeding out whoppers manually would take time and manpower. The solution? A giant automated moving sieve. Only the right-sized beans fall through onto a conveyor belt. All rejections go for animal feed.
It's time to actually blanch them now. We're looking to add between 50 and 60% water into the dry bean. At the end of that process, we'll be ready to send it downstairs into our filling department to be mixed with the sauce.
But first, the beans face one last tough selection hurdle. And it involves cutting-edge laser technology to make sure the beans are all the same colour. Terry Morrissey started working at Kitt Green over 40 years ago, long before anyone thought of using lasers here.
What we used to do to get the bad beans out is it was too hot and a spoon. We get a little lug box and take all the black beans out, which was really boring, laborious.
The modern alternative, the laser beam, checks every single bean for imperfections. If it finds one that's the wrong colour, the bean is simply blown off the production line. Above the factory floor is a top-secret area. It's here the baked beans sauce is mixed to a special recipe they've kept under their hats ever since the first production line in the USA more than 100 years ago.
There are only 2 people on site that know the full recipe, and I'm not one of them.
Back on the factory floor, just 90 minutes into production, the beans in their secret sauce are being sealed in cans at a rate of more than 13 every second. At this point, they're still just beans, but they're about to become baked beans. And amazingly, they're baked while in the can to 120 Celsius before being cooled again to prevent discoloration. And although the factory is almost entirely mechanized, there is one critical job left that can only be done by humans.
Even though so much technology now at Heinz, this comes down to the human part, the nitty-gritty, that's the taste. This is very important because we're the last line of defence. If things are not right here, it could go out to the public. Everything all right, Graham?
No problems at all, Keith.
Can you stand sheet, please?
I can, yeah.
We're actually looking for sour or musty taste. So that's why we do a taste every 2 hours, so we can pick up anything that's not right.
2.5 hours after the dried beans first hit the production line, the finished product is speeding into the labelling and packaging hall.
So far since the start of this shift an hour ago, we've produced 52,972 cans. Just under 53,000 of those have been accepted, giving a rejection of 30. That gives us 99.4% success so far this shift.
In just 6 hours, one of the world's most high-tech food processing plants has met its astronomically high daily target, a feat that only a mega factory could achieve.
Looking just a job, I think.
Yeah, right, good, yeah.
What I really like about these factories is just the speed the machinery goes at. It's a blur. It's beyond what you can follow. It's absolutely amazing.
Five jaw-dropping centres of mechanical excellence. 5 miracles of engineering and science. Each of them extraordinary in their own way. But which is the overall best of the best? In identifying the single mega factory which dominates the pack, all-round performance and ambition are the keys. So we've totaled the rankings for size, output, cost and workforce. And here is the final result. In 5th place, it's that extraordinary food processing plant at Kitt Green in England. Tying in 3rd place, Germany's colossal car plant in Wolfsburg. And the place where space dreams are made, the Kennedy Space Center. Stealing a march on both of them, 2nd place goes to the biggest producer of steel on the planet, the Posco Gwangyang in South Korea. Which means the world's #1 ultimate mega factory is India's Reliance Oil Refinery. Dwarfing every other refinery on Earth, as well as all its competitors in this countdown with its phenomenal output. This is a factory that is unlikely to be matched, ever.
This oil refinery takes oil refineries to a completely new level.
This factory is all about efficiency and output. It's super slick and super efficient. That's just phenomenal.